It was a quiet evening in the small town of Oakwood, a place where nothing ever seemed to change. The houses were old but well kept, the streets lined with trees that whispered in the wind. Oakwood was the kind of town that people could easily forget about. Life moved slowly here, almost like time had stopped, allowing its residents to live in their own little world. Alex Thompson was just like everyone else, going about their daily routine, always looking for something more, but never quite knowing what that something was. Alex was an average person by all standards. They worked at the local hardware store, helping customers with their home improvement needs. Alex's life was predictable and stable, yet there was always a lingering feeling of emptiness that they couldn't shake off. Every day felt like the same thing, over and over. There were moments when Alex would look at the stars, wondering if there was more to the world than what they saw around them. But it wasn't until that one fateful day in the forest that everything changed. It was a Thursday afternoon when Alex decided to take a walk in the woods just outside town. The weather was crisp, the kind of day that made everything feel alive and fresh. The sun peeked through the trees, casting long shadows on the forest floor. Alex loved going for walks in the woods. It was peaceful, almost like the world was paused for a while, allowing them to clear their mind. It was during one of these solitary walks that Alex noticed something strange. Just off the beaten path, partially buried in the ground, was a large, smooth stone. It was unlike anything Alex had ever seen before. It didn't look like it belonged in the forest. The stone was glowing faintly, a soft blue light radiating from its surface. The light was so subtle, almost like it was calling out to Alex. Curiosity tugged at them, urging them to step closer. Alex knelt down and touched the stone. The moment their fingers made contact, a surge of energy rushed through their body, and they were suddenly hit with a vision. The world around them seemed to blur, and they could see flashes of strange symbols, ancient ruins, and a distant, shimmering light. The vision was brief, lasting only a few seconds, but it left Alex feeling disoriented and confused. Is this some kind of trick? Alex muttered, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had overtaken them. But before they could stand up, a voice echoed in their mind, clear and strong. You have made a wish. Humanity's fate is now intertwined with yours. Alex froze, their heart racing in their chest. The voice was neither loud nor soft, but it reverberated deep within their mind. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't just a figment of their imagination. The stone, the energy, and the voice. They were all real. Alex's breath caught in their throat. What did the voice mean? What wish had they made? They hadn't wished for anything, not consciously. At least, the wish has been granted. The impossible shall become reality. The voice continued, its tone calm but undeniable. But know this, what you have set in motion cannot be undone. Alex tried to speak, to ask questions, but no words came out. Panic began to set in as the world around them seemed to shift. The trees in the forest rustled, and the air grew colder. The glowing stone pulsed with an intensity that made Alex's skin tingle. The voice was silent now, leaving Alex alone with their thoughts, but the feeling of being watched never left. For a moment, everything seemed normal again. The birds chirped, the breeze moved gently through the branches, and Alex was left standing in the woods, still holding the stone. But something felt different, something was off. It was as if the fabric of reality itself had been subtly altered, as though the rules of the universe had shifted, and Alex was caught in the middle of it all. Confused, Alex stood up and looked around. The forest seemed eerily quiet now, the once lively sounds replaced by a heavy silence. There was no doubt in Alex's mind. The stone had done something that could change everything. But what was it? What did the voice mean by granting a wish? And why had it chosen Alex? These questions flooded Alex's mind, but there were no answers. Before Alex could process any further, a flash of movement caught their eye. They turned quickly, but saw nothing. The hairs on the back of their necks stood up, and a chill ran down their spine. It was as if someone, or something, was watching them. Alex's heart pounded in their chest, but they couldn't explain why. The forest was still, too still. It was as if time itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. In that moment, Alex made a decision. They had to get to the bottom of this, whatever it was. There was no turning back now. With the stone still in their hand, Alex began to walk back toward the town, but something felt off. The path they had walked so many times before seemed different now, twisted somehow. The trees looked taller, the shadows darker, and the air heavier. Alex's footsteps were quiet, almost as if the earth beneath them had become softer. Every step felt like it took longer to take, as though the world itself was slowing down. By the time Alex reached the edge of the forest, the sun had started to dip behind the horizon, casting an orange glow across the sky. As Alex stepped out of the woods and into the familiar streets of Oakwood, they noticed something strange. The people walking along the road, neighbors they'd seen countless times, were behaving differently. A man who usually kept to himself smiled warmly at Alex, something he had never done before. A woman who always seemed rushed and impatient took a moment to chat with a stranger on the corner, showing kindness that was completely out of character. Alex shook their head, trying to make sense of what was happening. It couldn't just be a coincidence. The stone, the wish, the voice, something was changing, and it was happening to everyone around them. But what kind of change was it? And why had it started with them? As Alex walked through the town, they began to notice even more unsettling things. People who had always been selfish or cold were suddenly acting with compassion and generosity. A child helped an elderly woman carry her groceries. A group of teenagers stopped to help a man fix his broken bicycle. Alex's head was spinning. This wasn't the world they had known. This was something entirely new, something beyond anything they could understand. But there was more to come. As night fell, strange lights began to appear in the sky, faint streaks of blue and purple that danced across the heavens. The stars themselves seemed to shimmer more brightly, as though the universe was responding to the shift that Alex had unknowingly set in motion. The impossible had begun to unfold, and just as Alex was beginning to realize the magnitude of what had happened, the voice returned. It echoed in their mind again, this time louder and more urgent. Humanity has been given a chance. But remember, every gift comes with a price. Alex stopped dead in their tracks, the weight of the words settling heavily on their shoulders. What had they done? What would happen next? The stone had granted a wish, but it wasn't just any wish. It was a wish that would change the very fabric of reality, one that would test the limits of humanity's potential. Alex's world, the world they had known, was gone, and in its place was something new, something far more powerful and dangerous. The impossible was becoming reality, but at what cost? And as the night grew darker, Alex couldn't help but wonder, had they unleashed a force too great to control? The following days were nothing like what Alex had known before. The small, peaceful town of Oakwood, which had always been quiet and predictable, was now humming with an energy that Alex couldn't explain. The feeling of something different, something bigger, lingered in the air. It was like the world had shifted on its axis, and Alex was the only one who knew it. But even they couldn't fully grasp the extent of the change. Not yet. The morning after Alex found the stone, they woke up to an eerie calm. The town was still asleep, bathed in the early light of dawn. But there was a subtle difference in everything. Alex sat up in bed, rubbing their eyes, and looked out the window. The sun had risen, but it felt more vibrant, more alive than it ever had before. The trees in the yard seemed greener, the sky clearer. It was as if the world had been given a fresh coat of paint, making everything look new again. At first, Alex tried to shake off the strange feeling. It could all just be in their head, right? Maybe the vision from the night before had been nothing more than a dream. After all, No one else seemed to notice anything unusual. The town was the same as it always was, quiet, small, and comfortable. But the stone was still there, lying on Alex's bedside table, glowing faintly in the morning light. Without thinking, Alex picked it up again. As soon as their fingers brushed the surface, the familiar pulse of energy rushed through them, and the voice spoke again. "The change has begun. Humanity is waking up." Alex's heart skipped a beat. They had hoped it was all just some figment of their imagination, but it wasn't. The voice was real. And the wish they had made, or rather, the wish that had been granted, was already beginning to take shape. Humanity was waking up. But to what? The stone, despite being small and unassuming, felt heavy in Alex's hand. It was as if it carried the weight of the entire world, or perhaps it was the weight of the impossible. There was no turning back now. The world had changed, and Alex was the catalyst. As Alex got ready for the day, they noticed something strange. People in the town were different. At first, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. The grocer at the market, Mr. Jacobs, had always been gruff and impatient with customers. But this morning, he smiled as Alex approached the counter, his expression warm and friendly. "Good morning, Alex. How's the weather treating you?" he asked, making small talk in a way he'd never done before. Alex blinked, taken aback. "Oh, it's great. Thanks, Mr. Jacobs," they replied, unsure of what had just happened. Mr. Jacobs didn't usually say much beyond a curt hello or goodbye. The sudden friendliness made Alex feel uneasy. As Alex continued to walk through the town, they noticed similar changes everywhere. People were smiling more, making eye contact, and engaging with one another in ways that were totally out of character. The barista at the local cafe, who usually worked in silence, greeted Alex with a genuine smile and handed them their coffee with a friendly, "Have a great day." The mechanic, who Alex had known to be grumpy and standoffish, waved and said, "How's your car holding up? Need anything checked?" He even asked about Alex's family, something he'd never cared to do before. It was as if the whole town had suddenly shifted from indifferent to compassionate. Alex felt a knot form in their stomach. This couldn't be a coincidence. It wasn't just that people were being nicer. They were acting differently, more selfless, more aware of the needs of others. Something was happening, something that Alex couldn't explain. Later that afternoon, while walking home, Alex noticed a woman struggling to carry a heavy bag of groceries. Normally, people would walk by, pretending not to notice, but not today. A young man, perhaps in his early 20s, rushed over to her without hesitation and offered to help. "Let me carry that for you," he said, smiling. The woman, shocked, accepted, and they continued down the street together, chatting like old friends. Alex watched, astonished. This wasn't just kindness. It was as if a fundamental shift had occurred in people's hearts. Where there had once been indifference, there was now an outpouring of goodwill. But where had it come from? What had triggered it? Later that evening, the change became even more evident. Alex was sitting in the town square when they saw a small group of teenagers gathered around a homeless man who had been living on the street for months. Normally, people would avoid him, cross the street to steer clear, but tonight was different. The teenagers were sitting with him, laughing and offering him food. One of them even handed him a coat to keep warm. The homeless man, who had always seemed invisible to the world, was now the center of attention. He smiled at the teenagers, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaking. "You don't know how much this means." Alex felt a lump form in their throat. They had never seen anything like this before. The kindness, the empathy, it wasn't just random acts of good deeds. It was a wave of compassion that seemed to be sweeping over the entire town, like a force of nature. It was as if everyone had suddenly been awakened to the needs of those around them. But Alex couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. The voice had said that humanity's fate was intertwined with theirs, and the more Alex saw, the more they realized that this wasn't just a blessing. It was a change that came with consequences. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. The weight of everything, the stone, the changes, the people, pressed heavily on their mind. They couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to the world. People were changing. Humanity was changing. But was it for the better? Or was it the beginning of something far more dangerous? In the dead of night, Alex rose from their bed and grabbed the stone from the bedside table. It was cold to the touch, yet still pulsed with that faint, electric energy. Holding it in their hands, Alex whispered, "What's happening? Why are people changing? What did I do?" The voice, calm and distant, returned to their mind. Humanity has awakened. They will begin to understand the power they hold. But remember, this is only the beginning. Alex felt a shiver run down their spine. Only the beginning. What did that mean? What was coming next? Just as the voice faded, a loud crash came from outside. Alex jumped, heart racing. They ran to the window and looked out into the street. In the distance, a car had crashed into a tree. People were gathering around the wreck, but there was no panic, no chaos. Instead, everyone was calm, helping the injured driver with remarkable efficiency. It was as if they knew exactly what to do. It was clear now. The change had begun in full force, and Alex could only wonder what the world would look like when it was over. Was this the beginning of a new age for humanity, one where kindness and empathy ruled? Or was it the beginning of something more dangerous, something that would bring about a darker side to the gift they had unknowingly unleashed? Alex had no answers, only questions, and as the night grew darker, the unease grew stronger. The days following the sudden change were both exhilarating and terrifying. Oakwood, once a quiet town, was now a place of constant wonder and anxiety. The miraculous acts of kindness continued, growing more frequent and more bizarre by the day. People no longer just helped their neighbors. They performed feats of unimaginable generosity and courage, acts that defied the laws of nature. But with every small act of good, something darker was lurking just beneath the surface. Alex could feel it, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to happen. It began with the whispers. At first, they were just murmurs, rumors of strange occurrences in other towns. People were talking about how the same wave of transformation had begun to spread beyond Oakwood, first to the neighboring towns, then to cities across the country. News outlets started reporting about inexplicable events. In New York, a woman had pulled an entire bus full of people out of a sinking river. In London, a child had revived a dying bird with nothing more than a touch. The impossible was becoming a reality, and humanity was caught in the middle of it. But as the miraculous spread, so did fear. People started to question the source of the power. Where was it coming from? Why was it happening? And why now? Alex had to know. The voice, the stone, the strange shift in humanity. It all pointed back to them. They couldn't ignore it any longer. They needed answers. One night, as Alex walked through the town square, they noticed something new. The once jovial crowd had gathered around a large television screen set up on the side of a building. The crowd was silent, watching with intense concentration. On the screen, a news anchor spoke urgently. In a small town in Maine, a group of people has experienced a sudden and violent transformation. The power of the gift that has spread across the country seems to have turned against them. There are reports of entire neighborhoods descending into chaos as people's newfound abilities become uncontrollable. Authorities are urging calm, but no one knows how to stop it. Alex's stomach dropped. A shiver ran down their spine. It was happening. The power, the change, had gone too far. People were no longer just doing good. They were starting to wield their abilities recklessly, without understanding the consequences. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. They sat by the window, staring out into the quiet streets, wondering how much longer this could last. The stone, which had sat innocently on the table for days, seemed to pulse in response to their thoughts. Alex picked it up, feeling its cold surface against their skin. The stone, once a source of hope, now felt like a burden, a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. Humanity has been given a choice, the voice spoke, filling their mind once again. But every gift comes at a cost. The balance is fragile. Alex clenched their fists, frustration boiling inside them. What do you mean? What's happening to the world? The gift is too powerful for mankind to control. It is a force that cannot be contained. The change has already begun. There is no stopping it. Alex's mind raced. The impossible had become reality. But now humanity was teetering on the edge of destruction. It was no longer about kindness and unity. It was about control. People were using their newfound powers without understanding the weight of them. Some were trying to help, while others were exploiting their abilities for personal gain. The very fabric of society was crumbling. You must make a choice, the voice continued. You can end it all, destroy the stone and the power it holds, or you can allow humanity to continue, but the consequences will be far greater than you can imagine. Alex's heart pounded in their chest. What do you mean? What will happen? But the voice did not answer. For hours, Alex sat there, torn between the decision that lay before them. The power to stop it all was in their hands, but at what cost? If they destroyed the stone, everything, the miraculous change, the hope, the unity, would vanish. Humanity would return to what it once was, to the cold, indifferent world they had lived in before. But if they allowed the power to continue, what would happen? Would the world tear itself apart? Would chaos reign? The next morning, the answer came. It wasn't just the whispers of chaos anymore. It was happening right in front of Alex's eyes. As Alex stepped out into the streets, they saw the crowd again. But this time, something was different. The people who had once shown nothing but kindness were now on edge. Their eyes were wild, frantic, as if they didn't know how to control the power that coursed through them. A woman, standing on the street corner, suddenly lifted a car with her bare hands, her face contorted in a mix of fear and exhilaration. She threw it down the street, smashing it against a building, her actions seemingly out of control. "Stop! Stop it!" Alex shouted, running toward her, but the woman didn't hear. The power was too much for her to handle. Others gathered around, and soon a crowd formed. The atmosphere was tense, charged with a dangerous energy. Alex felt a surge of panic. This was what the voice had meant. The change had gone too far. People were no longer able to control their abilities, and as the power spread, so did the destruction. The world was on the brink of chaos. It was happening right in front of them. Then, another shockwave rippled through the crowd. A man, standing in the middle of the street, raised his arms and caused the very ground beneath him to crack open. The earth trembled, and cracks spread through the pavement, sending people scrambling for safety. The chaos escalated, and Alex realized that they had no choice. The power that had once been a gift was now a curse. Humanity's newfound abilities were tearing the world apart. In that moment, Alex knew what they had to do. They ran back to their house, the stone still pulsing with energy in their hand. The decision was clear. Humanity's fate was in their hands, but there was no way to save them from themselves. The balance of power had been disrupted, and there was only one way to restore it. With trembling hands, Alex held the stone high above their head. The voice returned, but it was quieter now, almost mournful. "You are ready, Alex. The choice is yours." Alex's breath caught in their throat. The weight of the decision pressed down on them. They could end it all. The power, the chaos, the destruction. They could return the world to its former state, before the stone had granted the wish. But that would mean the end of the miracles, the end of hope. Or they could allow humanity to continue down this unpredictable path. But there would be no turning back. With a final, resolute breath, Alex made the decision. They slammed the stone down onto the ground, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. And in that instant, everything stopped. The energy that had filled the air vanished. The earth's tremors ceased. The wildness in people's eyes faded, and the once chaotic crowd fell silent. The stone's power had been destroyed. But as the dust settled, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't just ended the power. They had ended something much bigger. Humanity had been given a glimpse of its potential, but it had proven too much for them to handle. And now, Alex would have to live with the consequences. The aftermath of Alex's decision to destroy the stone was nothing short of surreal. The world seemed to hold its breath, as if the very fabric of reality had been reset, and for a brief moment there was an eerie stillness. The once chaotic town of Oakwood, and the rest of the world that had been swept up in the frenzy of humanity's newfound power, now stood in silence. The energy, the wild rush of abilities, the miracles that had once felt like a gift, had all vanished. It was as if the stone had never existed. Alex stood in the middle of the street, staring down at the shattered pieces of the stone. The coldness that had gripped the world had slowly begun to melt away. The strange, foreign energy that had surged through the town and beyond had dissipated. There was no more chaos, no more fear. It was over. But as Alex looked around, they couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper had changed, something that went beyond the immediate effects of the stone's destruction. The crowd that had once been on the edge of hysteria now stood still, their faces blank for a moment, as if they were waking up from a dream. Slowly, people began to look at one another with confusion, as if trying to remember what had just happened. Alex's heart pounded in their chest, wondering if the choice they had made was truly the right one. But as the minutes passed, something beautiful began to unfold. The first person to speak was an elderly woman standing nearby. She had been part of the crowd that had thrown objects and shouted in fear just moments before. Now her eyes were soft, filled with something different, compassion. "Are you okay?" she asked a young man who had been caught in the middle of the earlier chaos. "Are you hurt?" The young man, who had been terrified just moments ago, nodded, his eyes wide with a newfound understanding. I'm fine. Thank you," he said, his voice steady but uncertain. It wasn't the fear that had driven him earlier. It was a sense of empathy, of care for those around him. More people started to speak. People who had once used their newfound abilities recklessly were now looking at each other, offering apologies, shaking hands, and helping those who had been hurt. The sense of community that had been broken by the chaos was now being rebuilt, but this time it was grounded in understanding, not power. As Alex looked around, they began to see something remarkable. The world hadn't just been reset. It had transformed in a way that was not immediately visible, but deeply meaningful. Humanity had seen the possibility of greatness, the potential to rise above their limitations, to show kindness and unity. The power that had been unleashed had been too much to bear, but it had also shown humanity the depth of their compassion, their ability to help each other, and their capacity for kindness. The stone's destruction hadn't been the end of the story. It had been the beginning of something more important. Humanity had been given a glimpse of its true potential, but it wasn't through the raw power they had wielded. It was through the way they chose to help each other, to rebuild, to care. Alex stood in the street, breathing in the cool air, feeling a sense of peace wash over them. The turmoil, the fear, the tension that had gripped their heart for so long was finally dissipating. They had made the hardest decision of their life, but as they looked at the people around them, they knew it had been the right one. As the days passed, the world began to return to a more familiar rhythm, but it was a rhythm that had been altered by the events that had unfolded. People no longer took each other for granted. Neighbors helped one another, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to be there for each other. The elderly were no longer ignored, and the young were no longer disconnected from the needs of the world around them. Communities were coming together in a way that Alex had never seen before, and the sense of unity and shared purpose was palpable. Alex's thoughts turned to the future. While they had destroyed the stone, they realized that humanity didn't need magic or miraculous powers to be extraordinary. The true strength of humanity lay not in the ability to control the world around them, but in their ability to work together, to empathize with one another, and to lift each other up. In the weeks that followed, Alex saw the world begin to heal. The small acts of kindness that had once seemed extraordinary had become the norm. People were more patient, more understanding, and more connected. It wasn't just Oakwood that had changed. Everywhere Alex looked, from the bustling cities to the quiet suburbs, there was a shift. The chaos of the previous days had shown people the depth of their own potential, and now they were choosing to live in a way that was more intentional, more mindful. One afternoon, Alex walked through the town square, noticing the subtle shifts that had taken place. The benches where people once sat in isolation were now filled with conversation. People smiled at one another, sharing stories, offering help, and taking the time to listen. There was a sense of warmth in the air, a warmth that had been missing before. As Alex walked, they came across a familiar face. It was Mr. Jacobs, the gruff grocer who had been so cold and distant before the change. Now he was talking to a young woman, helping her load groceries into her car. As Alex approached, Mr. Jacobs turned to them with a smile. "Good afternoon, Alex," he said, his voice no longer sharp but warm, genuine. "How are you today?" Alex smiled, feeling a warmth spread through their chest. "I'm doing well, Mr. Jacobs. How about you?" "I'm good. I'm just glad we're all getting back to normal," he said, his eyes reflecting a kindness that had once been absent. "You know, it's funny. I used to rush through my day, never really noticing the people around me. But now, I don't know. I feel like I'm seeing things differently." Alex nodded. "I know what you mean. It's like the world was given a second chance." "It was, wasn't it?" Mr. Jacobs replied, a soft smile playing on his lips. "And maybe that's the real gift. Not the miracles, but the way we choose to live after them." As Alex continued walking through the town, they couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. The future was uncertain, but the changes that had begun were rooted in something powerful: humanity's ability to come together, to help one another, and to choose kindness in the face of chaos. The stone may have been destroyed, but the message it had delivered was clear. Humanity didn't need to rely on miraculous powers to change the world. The real magic was in the way people cared for one another, the way they chose to act with love, empathy, and understanding. In the end, Alex realized that the true power had never been in the stone, but in the hearts of the people around them. And as long as humanity continued to choose kindness, there was no limit to what they could accomplish together. As the sun set over Oakwood, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Alex smiled, knowing that humanity's journey was just beginning. This was the new beginning, a world where people didn't need miracles to be extraordinary. All they needed was each other.